Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please welcome to the Town of Pilgrim's December Planning Commission meeting. If I could, Hannah, have a roll call to my left, please.
Sure. Cheryl Ruminant,
Here.
Brad
We're all
Valentine,
here.
Tim Pritchard,
Here.
Kyle Eichmark,
Here.
Jenny Sisson. Here. Carol Hannah,
Here.
Andrew Roy.
Here.
All present. If I could have the board to review the minutes from the November meeting. Entertain a motion to accept. Corrections or additions?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Jen. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and second for the minutes from the November meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, moving on to old business, petition for DR Horton from the Franklin Urbanus property has been postponed until November or January meeting.
They officially requested a continuance from the board.
Okay.
That you have to vote on.
We have to vote on that.
Yes.
All right.
I'll
We'll
make a
accept that.
motion to approve their continuance.
Yes.
Make a motion.
Make a motion, have a
Yeah.
second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor of continuing the petition to the January meeting as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Okay,
I've got some. Your favorite.
the EDO amendments.
No, we're getting down to it. It's getting real solid. So, my budget was so tiny. Will you go to table 310 in the UDO amendments?
Oh,
Is it like is it in this presentation or a different?
No, that's in a separate folder. December.
310.
I have November up there all this time.
Yep.
Oh, we got two.
See. I'm
They're
glad
order.
everybody knows.
There's 6.
Okay, that one. The table?
Yeah, so, this table is, for foundation plantings. As you can see there, the top one, like all of them have per every so many feet. And with 80-foot or less front facade, it just says 3 shrubs. I didn't know if that was something we wanted to put so many feet on. People have the ability to either cluster or put like formal plantings as far as how they want to place them around the foundation. But I kind of thought it should have a so many feet, because if you have a 79-foot facade with 3 little shrubs, it doesn't really do anything, in my opinion.
because they could just put 3 little ones in the corner then, is what you're saying.
Just make it the same as 80, whatever.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So 3 shrubs every 20 feet. Is that what you're saying, Tim?
Yes, right. Everybody all right?
Well, how come the side and rear facades, the first one's 1 shrub every 30, but if it's more than 80 feet, it's 1 shrub or ornamental
You
every
want it to be
40.
and?
I mean, if we're doing it every per linear dimension, this should be 1.
Make them both the same.
Okay, so how would you like me to amend that?
I'm having a tough time envisioning 3 shrubs on a street facade that is 75 feet.
Wolfie's. The front of Wolfie's is 79 feet.
So they have 3 shrubs.
No, they've exceeded theirs exponentially with theirs, but.
But for minimum compliance, they could drop 3 in.
Yeah,
And is there a definition of what types of ornamental trees are acceptable?
we have our tree manual, that speaks to the invasive versus non-invasive, like the native species. And there's a recommended ornamental list, but as long as it's not invasive, they can really select any sort of ornamental tree.
Does it need to be noted to ensure that they don't plant the invasive trees?
No, we have that in there already.
Okay.
And then also we do have a minimum caliper for any tree.
I mean, it looks like if we just made everything one shrub or tree every 20 feet, and the side, one shrub or tree every 40 feet, it would be a lot easier.
Three's pretty
The only
skinny.
thing,
80
do we
feet.
need to worry about where start blocking as they grow and it starts blocking the vision of turning in and out?
Right. And that's probably why there's not a tree for something 80 feet or less, because if it's over 80 feet, if something grows a little bigger, it might either take a really long time or never cover it up entirely. So I would suggest just sticking with the 3 shrubs on that. I just think a per so many feet would be good to designate. And then if we're looking at the shrub or ornamental tree, if you want to change that to and, because a tree is obviously much different than a shrub as far as the coverage and aesthetically how it looks. We can do that too.
Now, don't you have to approve the plan anyway when they present it to you? So you would be able to acknowledge if something is gonna block or
Certainly.
is inappropriate. So that's how that's prevented.
Okay.
Now, I mean,
Yeah, there's the
but if it's a
access control
certain-
ordinance prevents this, their site triangles.
Mhm.
sure, yeah, this is
Okay.
foundations up against the building.
Oh.
But you still have control even with this.
I do, but if, if they're planting an ornamental tree that fits the code and it is one that grows to be 60 feet tall, or there's another breed that only grows to be 12 feet tall, we don't have anything in there that says you can't use this, especially if it's not an invasive species. So if they wanted to, it would be detrimental in, 10 years, but it fits the code as it sits. We can't tell them no, if that's what they want. We mostly look for if it's invasive, if it's the right size, and if it's a maple. We don't plant maples anymore. We have way too many maples.
So what's your recommended change? For the,
So 3 shrubs, I was gonna say, either every 20 or 30 feet for the 80 feet or less facade facing the street. That was really my only suggestion.
Yeah.
but
I think if that's 1 per every 20 feet is good for more than 80 feet, then it should be good for less.
mhm.
what about the side and rear?
Well, this is,
We're just talking about changing that
Straight.
one box.
Yeah, just the
yeah.
one. So if on the side it's 1 for every 30, maybe on the fronts it'd be 3 for every 30. Because the fronts are supposed to be more ornamented than the sides.
1 for 20 and then 1 for 30.
3 and 80 feet is pretty skinny.
That's what I thought.
We'll just change it to 1 shrub every 20.
1 or 3. Shrubs.
Or 3 shrubs per 20 feet.
That's what I was saying.
Okay.
Oh,
We
I
don't have
like
to
the
do that.
3 and 20.
3 and 20. okay.
So we'll do that for both, less than or more than?
I think we'll just put it where it says 3 shrubs, just for that designation.
So if you have a facade that's 79 feet, you're gonna have 3 shrubs every 20 feet.
Mhm.
If you have an 81-foot facade, you're gonna have 1 shrub every 20 feet instead of 3 shrubs every 20 feet.
Okay.
I mean, that's how it would
So
be,
we got
right?
3 every 20, period,
I think
every
3
20.
period.
For all
Both
3
boxes.
of these front facades?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we'll see. I mean, I guess we're gonna see if that's gonna be. So how many does Wolfies have? You know?
100 billion.
Okay. So then they wouldn't,
So they definitely have 3 per 20 and it looks fine.
Yeah.
and they
I think they
usually,
have like 1 a foot.
they usually cluster in 3s anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so 3 shrubs every 20 feet for the front facades in this whole table.
Why is that construction design release in that table? It seems like a
It's required
weird
to.
spot for,
Because that's DB zoning, so I don't know if that just means.
in any commercial building, you're gonna have to have
Hmm.
department DHS release.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And whatever the little C thing is on the word facade, what's that called?
An umlaut?
No?
Well, the umlaut's the dots,
Oh.
right? But it's in the front facades of the top table, but not in the side or rear or the bottom. So it's different everywhere. So those are,
Do you know how to make that in InDesign?
I'm
I
sure,
don't.
I'm sure it's
You may have to take the keyboard to French. I think it's
you
a.
hold down Alt and you type a 4-digit
French,
code.
that
and
was
it
it.
pops up.
I'll hit the Google on it and see if I can find that. Okay,
I'm never gonna be able to do that.
okay, so
Insert
three,
symbol, I think.
So three every
three
20.
shrubs every 20 feet
Okay.
for all of these. Should this be changed then to something? Just any building in downtown business
Three
that
per-
is able to
Three per
have?
20 period.
No, I mean, it says construction designer lease
I
required.
mean, there's no reason, if we do 3 per 20, the second column is 1 per 30.
It just would change the side and rear of abilities. Or that, those would be the only ones that are different, everything else would be the same.
I guess that should just say all facades instead of having that.
Right, that's what I thought, I'm not sure why it says that, that's a good point.
I mean, it's true, so it doesn't hurt anything.
Mhm. Okay. We'll change that to all facades. I did look at that in the original document KK gave us from what, June of 21, and it said that in there too, so. I don't know if there was something discussed with like HPC about that, because downtown business is their area, I don't know. But I can definitely change it. Okay. All right, so are we good with that amendment? Then?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, can you please go to page 90, screening and ponds? So this is in the landscaping section as well. And let's see, numbers 18 and 19. So these pertain to landscape screening and landscape around ponds. So as it sits right now, RC zoning isn't included in either of these things. Now, in the screening standards, some of these things would not, you know, inoperable vehicles is only allowed in certain zones. RC is not one of them. However, dumpsters, other, you know, containers, mechanical equipment, since multifamily is allowed in RC zoning, some of these things might become relevant and should be required if a development goes in. So I'd like to just have it be all in both of these. Same with this one. This is for ponds over 2 acres. Not that that's a huge possibility for an RC subdivision because we don't have all that much land. But like the Howard's property is a good example where if it's over 2 acres, we need to be able to make sure we can enforce safety, riprap, and vegetative buffers around those ponds if they go in.
So why do you think they were excluded?
Well, I think it's because the subdivision types, like, you know how we had kind of separated out traditional and RC? I think it was because there wasn't an expectation that an RC subdivision would ever really be built. It would just kind of be infill. We had kind of distinguished an area where that could occur. So I think that's why maybe some of those things were missing. Same as like a density limit for RC. So maybe the original idea was to have that be in infill areas only, but that if you look at that map we made, there's still like considerable areas where there could be an actual platted subdivision. Not just like Kyle Smith's. Would be my guess.
But even in RC, you'd want to
You
have
wanted, yeah, you want
screening
the
and,
screening. Yeah, that's what I would think.
yeah. So you're just gonna take, it's gonna say applies to all zoning districts on both 18 and 19.
Yes. Indeed.
Is there anything about retention ponds and if they don't hold water?
I don't
I mean, a
know.
lot of places will make the developer put in like a clay liner or something, so it holds water.
Hmm.
Cause there's a subdivision that's been done here recently, that the ponds aren't holding water at all.
Well, I would wonder if that would be part of the, like, maintenance bonding would come with that, where if it's leaking and not doing what it's supposed to, we'd pull a bond against the developer if they didn't fix it themselves.
Yeah.
That's
It
what
just-
I would
it just
guess,
looks
but
bad too.
yeah.
mean, I'm just
don't-
curious.
have we ever had an issue with that here, ponds not retaining?
Well, we don't have a lot of retention ponds. so.
Yeah.
And we
We've
had
got
no
one that's
rain.
non-functional.
Mhm.
I know of one that's non-functional that's now a mini forest.
Well, that's kind of cool though.
It's kind of close to me.
Okay, so the retention ponds that don't hold water.
So that would go back to
Let me see what we
ensuring
got.
developers have properly developed
Mhm.
before pulling the bond. Now that was another case. There weren't even bonds, but
Right, so the bonds will come into place, either they can install infrastructure without recording the plat, and then we inspect it, make sure it's okay, and they can record the plat and just pull maintenance bonds. Or they can record it so that they could sell the lots faster, I'm assuming is what that process is, but they have to performance bond everything at the highest amount. And then they come in and gradually will.
so do you guys go through a financial like worksheet to make sure that
We
there's
have a
enough
certified,
money for, you know, for the startup of dredging and all that later on for that development, for when they form their homeowners association, before the bond is released.
Like an initial deposit?
Yes, because the developer is supposed to fund that to kick off, but there really should be some kind of a financial worksheet. So the residents know every X years, this needs this maintenance, this preventative maintenance, and it's gonna cost X dollars for today. We're being funded with this amount,
I don't think we
start-
have anything
because
like that. All that we bond is just the infrastructure that we take over.
So if there's maintenance that needs to be done and the HOA doesn't have the money to do it, then it just doesn't get done.
that's right, and then
Yeah.
that's a problem.
I'm not quite sure how, is that something a town can even,
Fishers requires
Regulate.
like a 15%. You get an
Can we
estimate,
bond
you get
it?
an estimate for what it's gonna cost to do the maintenance and everything, and then the developer has to deposit
Yeah.
a certain down payment for the HOA to take over.
Because it's the
Okay.
town's responsibility to ensure health, safety, and welfare of our residents.
you said that
And
was
when
Fisher's?
we're approving a development, we're also approving, this is gonna have an HOA. And so we're
Mhm.
short-sighted if we don't see it all the way through financially.
Mhm.
Like, not we personally as a town funding it, but as far as the developer, making sure that was deposited, making sure that was even created.
Mhm.
So
Also,
I-
I think having a better transition from when the developer relinquishes it to the HOA, there seems to be a lot of confusion with how that works, but
You know, all that our code says is that we require it, they have to have recorded CCRs, but, you know, we obviously don't dictate what those look like, but all we require right now is that they have it. So, but I'll look into this Fisher's bond, do you know what it's called? Is it just an HOA deposit bond or something?
It's like a BMP maintenance bond, I think is what they call
Okay, I'll look into that. It's a good idea, thank you.
Hannah, back to your ponds.
Yes.
Those ponds serve two purposes. One, they're dug to remove material to grade and fill on the job site.
Okay,
Secondly, they're dug to retain or hold water.
yeah,
If that specification is not in there to make that pond with a liner, that earth contractor is not gonna do it. That's a lot of extra work. I'm not
Okay.
devil's advocate, but if it's not in the job specifications, he's not gonna do it. We can't hold him to it.
okay,
from that pond.
Well, and it just depends
So
on
we're gonna have
the,
to go back and see how the job was bid. If he was required to do that,
mhm.
or we're gonna have to make him do it.
Is that something we wanna just include in here?
That's-
Somewhere that
we
I
should
can,
probably look at other municipalities to see how they word it.
If
Okay.
they're spec'ing that, we need to spec,
I mean, ponds should be designed to hold water.
right?
basically.
And to do that, you're talking about it
That's
usually.
sad, you had to include that.
Well, I mean, it depends on the site. If you hit sand.
You hit
or-
sand, it'll never hold water.
Yeah, unless you pack it. with
You don't have
clay.
to put
But there's ways
Blue
around
Falls
it.
goes dry in the summer all the time too.
Mhm. Okay, well, let me look through any storm references or retention references in here and see if that is included. And if not, we can put that in the UDO and then also, make a note in the bonds that, what'd you say, in the bid, that the retention.
It needs to be shown in the plan so they know to bid it.
They
Yeah,
gotta bid it that way. That was my point. That job wasn't bid to install a liner there, which is usually 18 to 24 inches of clay
mhm,
compacted. They're not gonna do it. That's a lot of extra work.
okay.
They usually just dig down, grade it smooth, and they're done.
Mhm.
In fact, most of all the overburden of big old rocks, stuff they don't want, goes in the bottom of the pond.
Now, is there anything with the county drainage standards that require, that say it has to retain water when it comes to their drainage calculations and
I don't-
whatnot?
I don't know.
Our stormwater ordinance that we just passed and plan
Mhm.
and technical manual, I think addresses the ponds now. It also requires as-built to be submitted once.
Okay.
Given, so.
So we might just be able to
Some more
reference
key.
that in
Well,
here.
I searched that document for the word liner,
Yeah, I
a
don't
couple
know
other
if I have
things, and
liner, but
I
know
couldn't
it
find
does
anything about
address
it
retention
making it
ponds.
hold water. Yeah.
Okay, so we got a few ways that we can.
When if you look at this one up here, I mean, when they don't hold water, they erode, the
Mhm.
vegetation doesn't grow. I mean, it's a maintenance issue. so.
Yeah. Okay, all right, some good directions I can go in. So we're okay with that, having that in all districts, is me?
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right, next can you pull up campground? See my lovely graphic work, at work. So this hasn't come up yet, but it's been on my UDO list, is there's a little bit of contradicting language, when it comes to campgrounds. So, campground is defined as the parcel, right, that the campground is on. Rec and open space and a few others allow it by right, public or private. And then a campsite, shown here in these white boxes, is the piece of land you have to have on your campground that's at least 900 square feet for camping purposes, right? And then the camping unit sits on the campsite. That's your tent or your RV or your pull behind trailer thing, right? However, in the occupancy standards of the campground, it says you cannot have permanent or semi-permanent structures such as cabins, lean-tos, or habitable buildings. Yet, camping unit has those in its definition. And so if you're looking at the definitions, one says you can have cabins and lean-tos and the other says you cannot. So how would you like me to edit that? Do you want me to edit the occupancy or edit the camping unit to remove cabin and lean-to
I think you remove cabin and lean-to.
from the
From the
definition?
Definition of the unit,
Okay,
yes.
okay, I will do that. Okay. Next thing I have, and I don't have a graphic for this, but that is our exterior materials, the vinyl percentages. I know we've been talking about that for a while as far as our table of exterior wall materials or finishes. So I have not been able to find anywhere that utilizes percentages of vinyl allowances in kind of the local area. I've checked Caramel Fishers, Noblesville, Ingalls, Hancock County, things like that. And I can't find anything. What I am finding is that we're missing a vinyl thickness. We have like a rigidity standard, but not a thickness standard. So you'll see there Hancock County's proposed is 0.048, Fishers is 0.0452, and Greenfield is 0.044. So if we want to add something like that, I think that would be good. The only thing I think maybe RC would be the only place I think we could comfortably either prohibit or very highly limit vinyl. I was going off of the historic design guidelines that the HPC has, and even though that's just for the downtown commercial structures, it does speak to some residential areas, and an unsuitable material listed in that guide is vinyl. So if we were to, I think, limit it somewhere, it should be RC. And that would be like where Kyle Smith's homes were built. Granted, if we have kind of any major subdivisions come in, they have to go through a rezone or platting anyways, and you can make that a commitment. But if someone were to just knock down a house and rebuild it, they could build it with vinyl. So if that's not something we want to see in our kind of historic fabric, that was kind of my only recommendation on that.
Is that gonna be a problem from the home affordability group about limiting vinyl? I know that's always a sore subject.
If it's just in like one, you know, it's
Historic
technically
zone.
part of the National Register,
I mean,
and
could
we
you-
are developing some residential design guidelines at some
I think
point.
there's a rational basis for that.
Yeah. That would kind of be the only place I would see it being appropriate, because there is a starkly smaller amount of vinyl in RC than any other zone that currently exists. That would be my suggestion, but yeah,
What do you
We
think?
can justify
okay.
So we should add 052 for the thickness?
Put 052 on the thickness.
Okay,
And
I will
then-
add 0.052 inches of thickness, and then, would you like me to remove that as an allowable material from RC zoning only, or prohibited? Or leave it as it is now, which is allowable in all of our residential zones.
Can you explain that as far as prohibited when it's built brand new or replaced from existing, or?
Well, I imagine it would be any sort of new build. I think we have a clause in there that if you're, you know, repairing
Similar.
up to a certain amount, you know, it's considered maintenance. So, you know, if you're re-siding one part of your home, that's not every single side of it, and it's vinyl, it can be vinyl. I think this is more geared towards new builds, or like complete facelift remodels. Exterior remodels, I should say.
Or
Hmm?
damage. Or damage.
Mhm. I'm all right with everyone. Any thoughts? I will remove vinyl from RC and put that thickness requirement in there. So next I have, I've been thinking about adding these for a while, and I think they're kind of a good addition until we get some residential design standards with HPC going. That's probably gonna take a while. And that's okay. We have some areas we'd like to target first, like small catalyst projects with this. However, looking at historic design guidelines from other areas, I found some areas where we could improve our architecture standards for RC zoning, which again is our historic fabric around our downtown business. And most of it's within our National Register district, not all of it, but probably like 90% of it. Which also keep in mind is our original town boundary is where our national district is. So that's pretty considerable. And rare. That doesn't happen, seem to happen very often. So will you please pull up that example sheet of RC architecture? So I think some things, right now, we only require the homes in RC zoning to have a front porch or covered entryway feature if the majority on the block have this feature. Which I think can work in some instances, but if you're looking at if there isn't any on the block, I mean, Kyle Smith's property technically had nothing on this block, but put it in the front porches. So I think it would be good to just require that regardless. Even gable end details, you can see some of those up here. So like these decorative gables that have something to accentuate that. This has barge board. You can see like the fleur de lis on the right-hand side, the rafters, the brackets. Doing something like this or having this be required, because I know it's not a typical home building type of thing. Dormers, if they fit the architecture of the area, which again is these kind of window outcrops. Front doors to have a significant glass window feature. I think that's really important because I use Broadway as kind of my test subject area, looking at the features that they have. And solid doors or like hyper modern doors are not part of that. There's a lot of glass and windows, side lights, transoms, things like that. So I think front doors should have some sort of glass feature, and I think it should be pretty significant.
If you go with colonial architecture, don't you just have traditional 6-panel exterior doors?
I
without
mean, yeah,
glass?
you certainly could, but there's, other features I think in the colonial that would offset that if you were to build one of those, that would still allow it to fit in with the historic fabric, I should say. Roof shapes and pitches that are similar to our existing historic fabric as defined by the National Register area. I do have a map of that if you want to see it, as well as, I would say there tends to be a larger percentage of window covering on the front facade of a historic structure. Whether it's stained glass, decorative, single pane, doesn't open, stuff like that. So windows on front facade should be a large part of the architectural style for this. So that's some suggestions I have for RC zoning to make sure it kind of looks like it fits in a little bit more. If we have either just a single home built or a development.
So all of these bullet points would be required?
I don't know about the front doors with significant glass. I'd have to. Because
I would say if they
some
had-
pretty tall wooden doors.
What if we let them have 2 side lights, they'd have a solid door.
Yeah, yeah,
And that
There's
was,
some beautiful oak doors.
yeah,
that's what I'm.
I had
thinking too.
originally put like, you could have a significantly glassed window or a transom window or a side light or all of the above. And then I just.
Why can't we say if it, again, fits with the National Historic Registry style of homes? Why do we have to be so prescriptive on the actual look of the door? As long as it fits, because you've got
You don't have
a
to.
wide, a lot of years.
We do, yeah.
I spent all weekend down in historic Madison. The only other, they're the city, we're the town, we're the only 2 in Indiana with that designation. And I saw a lot of solid doors and they were original, but they have a lot of pre-Civil War era homes too, a lot of
Yeah,
shotgun style.
I think it actually is, we're the only one of 2 that has our original boundary in the National Register. There's hundreds of.
But
national
in the state of
registers.
Indiana,
That's
there's
true.
only 2, there's no more towns in Indiana. I'm not talking the rest of the US, but as
No,
far
yeah.
as our state
Yeah. That's-
with the original boundaries.
Yeah, the only 2. Right.
But I do feel like I saw a lot that,
Sure, yeah, I mean, we can be as
Original.
specific or non-specific. These are just kind of some ideas I've thrown out there and because if you look at the RC requirements, it doesn't really change from any other subdivision, and that's not what we're going for. So these can be a start, we can make them more open, I guess, interpretive.
I guess I like all of them except the front door thing.
Okay. Certainly.
If you had 2 skylights, side lights.
Yeah.
with a solid
Or if you
door.
have big enough windows
Wait, it says
in
or
the-
side
in the
lights.
front of the house, then you
Mhm.
probably need.
We could put, how about recommended to have a glass feature? And that could be side lights, transoms, that could be glass
that'd
windows
be
within
okay.
the door. What about any of those other ones?
All the other ones are good.
I agree.
Okay, so I will add those to page 61, and then change that door bullet point to a recommended glass feature.
Can we do like a minimum of 3 of the list, or, kind of like how we do that? Your facade requirement,
I want it.
offsets, or
I,
you want
no.
whatever you want?
I want that to do all of it.
All of it. You wanna-
You say that the historic group is working on,
Yeah, they're looking to next year work with Indiana Landmarks to develop a residential design guideline. And start with, a certain street in town and just see how it works out with that, as far as
I know
like
they have to do
inventorying
that.
it and all of that. So they are looking to do that, and I do think that's
I
something.
think it's time.
Because if we could have instances where we're knocking down houses or not preserving things in the correct way, the National Register could, in theory, de-designate us. So,
So we can't lose that.
No.
But that is only if they were recognized in the register as a significant or contributing architectural asset, correct? If it was
I
just
think
a
they're already
home not
concerned.
identified,
I think they're already concerned. I'm sorry, concerned about what happened post the tornado.
mhm,
That's why I was asking. I think it's time to look at
yeah.
what we're requiring, what we're expecting. I think we need some guidance from that.
Well, yeah, and the thing to your point, Brad, is the interim report from the county historic. I don't remember who did it. It hasn't been done in like. So like, I don't know if those designations are still accurate that are in there, because they designate every structure within our national district. And I don't know how accurate that is anymore. So I could look in that document, it might not be.
well, I know they classified every structure within the district, but I thought the emphasis and what allowed us to have the district were just the top 2,
The notable outstanding
correct?
designations,
And the other ones were like, we cataloged them, they're here,
yeah,
they really have no impact.
because there's below that is contributing, and then I think either non-historic or non-contributing, something like that, but let me look into that, but Sandy Butler is helping me with this, and she knows that document better than I do, so I'll take a look at that. Okay. Last thing I have is a buffer overlay district. We had talked about this before. Kind of with the development that's going on west of town towards the highway. I think some sort of architectural overlay that could make that transition from our historic downtown to the highway and potentially other gateway areas. Without the Disneyland effect. I know that's something I've said a million times, but it's, make sure you're aware. So I just kind of wanted to start the conversation with you guys about where these should be, what it needs to entail. And I have some ideas there, so I'm kind of just looking to kick ideas off of you, things that are kind of missing in here. Something I had concerns about is the areas that are already really heavily established as car-centric areas. Is that appropriate to put an overlay like that, on those types of developments that are, there's a highway running through them, they're never, ever, ever gonna change. Or we just kind of focus on the areas coming into town that aren't nearly as developed, like, in between the town and, or downtown and the highway. A lot of potential there for that to kind of be a good buffer zone from the highway. However, I just have my concerns coming down 67, like if we were to look at 38 and 67. Unless all the buildings get knocked down and redone, I don't really see something like that. There are sidewalks, so it is pedestrian friendly. It's gonna have more sidewalks, so that's good.
There's not any empty lots even.
There's a few, but I've had some people talk to me about them. I guess the access points with what NDOT's planning on doing on 67 makes them less appealing. So, I mean, there are a few, but, and again, we could do this for anything that knocks down, redevelops a new build on those couple of lots. They just might look really weird juxtaposed on a car-centric development area. The parking's in the front, it's auto-centric, you know, they're widely spaced buildings, they're not sat up on the road, they don't have pedestrian amenities, which most historic areas, you know, pedestrian amenities, street level kind of things.
But I don't think we're 100% mirroring the historic district. This is just a transitional
Right.
with
Certainly,
some architectural features and
Yeah.
things we want.
and that's what I'm looking to you guys to tell me what direction to go in, like how deep are we getting in this, just aesthetics?
My perspective is we cover all of the major arteries and thoroughfares with it. Because at some point in time, there's gonna be a scrape and rebuild. If I look at a lot of the
That's a good
commercial
point.
properties in Pendleton, they are not what I would call top drawer. A lot of them have been retrofit 2 or 3 times. A lot of them are,
Okay.
you know, probably being held for the real estate property value
Mhm.
versus the structural value. And I don't know why we would not, as we discussed before, start at the intersection of 13 and 38,
Mhm.
bring it all the way through town to the far end, out past the high school where our town boundaries end, and then cover the 67 corridor in the areas that we maintain.
Okay.
Can always be changed, but I mean, the first time that someone takes that corner where the old electronics store was in the pole barn, metal framed architecture,
Belmont.
yeah. I mean, that's a perfect one where at some point in time, the land value for redevelopment at the intersection of
Jimmy's Dairy Bar.
36, 38, et cetera,
Mhm.
scraping it to eliminate the dog wash and dog babysitting and, you know, a Papa John's.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Not my pop.
Annie, you can't have favorites.
If we don't do it now, it'll never.
That's right.
Correct.
Put all 4 of them down. If they want to change it, they can ask for variance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what would you like me to look at including in this? Simply architecture, or are we looking to have, you know, setbacks, more pedestrian features, or really just focus on the aesthetic?
I think it's all of them.
All of them, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you look at the intersection of 67 and 38, one of the most common complaints is the unsafe traversal of those intersections, in particular with the schools on the far side.
Yep.
When you have CVS on one side and the sidewalks pick up,
Mhm.
and we only have them on one side of the street.
And I
They're on
think
38.
future pedestrian bridges.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we have a pedestrian bridge out here. We've got to ensure we've got linkages and connectivity going west from here. And I think we need to continue that same philosophy going east from the center of town.
And even down to the
South.
newer development.
67 going south, 60 crossing areas.
Yeah, to Hunsinger, there's a lot of children and family, and that's a big road, and the purpose is to pull us together as a community with our pathways and sidewalks and to make it safe.
Well, you know, we do have within our new code, and this is just this one aspect, but all of our zoning, you know, requires the sidewalks be built with a redevelopment or new, you know, and all those trails and connectivity are required already. I think if we're gonna focus on anything more, it would be, you know, where the building is placed and what it looks like, because all those features are already required.
But I even think deeper, looking at if we ever do add walkway bridges over some of these major thoroughfares,
Mhm.
we need to look at that land.
Okay.
Just like we have with Stubbs. We might not be able to connect through that land now, but in the future, we know that's designated. I think we need to do that with placement on future walkways, bridges.
Do we already have adequate green space expectation there?
You mean like per development or just
Well,
like
I'm
as
talking
far
about
as?
the corridors, the corridor line trees, so we already have, if we were going to, lay out this X,
Mhm.
do we have green space expectations, like even in front of the properties or retail spaces? that-
Yeah, I mean, everything has to have a, either an open space or an impervious surface limit. So there is that with every development.
I just feel like I don't see it even going to 69.
So
Makes a big difference.
when you're looking at our entire map,
Mhm.
and then from a planning perspective, you're designing your own town from scratch.
Sure.
For every quadrant, every district, you have so much park space. Do we do that with our current boundaries that we haven't developed yet?
Mm,
Before it's overdeveloped, we need to save X square footage for park space, we can't fill it up. And looking at things as quadrants, kind of like, I don't know if you've been to historic Savannah,
Mhm.
when it was designed.
Mhm.
They designed it with, it's almost like squares.
Yeah.
And it was, they had a little park space for every, I forget
Yeah.
now, but it should be in my head. And it was actually never really adopted, and I don't know why, because it was pretty genius.
Yeah.
I just feel like we need to look at that space too, before all of a sudden we're approving this and it's.
This is outside of our scope, but I believe that when the park master plan was redone, what, 3 years ago now? That they looked at the overall boundaries of the town and the development piece and looked at the long-term funding requirements to do acquisitions of additional properties and space to ensure that we had parks and green space. And there may be some subject matter experts in the audience that could address that
But as
plan.
far as every quadrant, so that something comes in front of us
Mhm.
and we're approving before long, say that, I'll just say northeast quadrant becomes filled.
Mhm.
There's no green space left. So I just want the right hand working with the left hand on these two things
Yeah.
and
certainly.
planning.
Well, I think
And
with
that
our
kind of-
comp plan being updated next year, we'll certainly be able to do that, because in our comp plan land use projections, there are rec and open spaces, but I don't know if there's necessarily any rhyme or reason to it. It's just, here would be a good space that, the park would probably want to acquire because it's nearby or something, but not necessarily there's this much park per person. With the impact fees they have now too, I'm wondering if that is kind of part of that, is getting that level of service per person.
But I think we should know that. I think we should have a map and we should know, we've approved X, it's taking a X space. And we're down to however much farmland. And so we understand that because you would need to know that as well.
Before we start approving rezones,
That's right.
Great idea.
Hmm.
Great idea.
Park. All right, so anything else with that though, direction wise you'd want me to look at?
So you're gonna put like a draft
Yeah.
overlay map?
Yeah.
With some-
All four directions.
Think big.
And then as far as, I think, one of the big things for me that I need your most direction on is what kind of architecture are you wanting to have this look like? Or where's a good example I can look at? Brad, I tried to look at Raleigh Durham.
RTP, Research Triangle Park, that whole corridor area.
Hoosier Triangle Park.
Research Triangle Park, RTP.
How about Main Street USA? That's in Disney World. I just came from Disney World, I don't want that. I don't need that.
I want the train.
Step to the podium, Edward.
Sure.
I haven't heard from you in a
We haven't heard
while.
from you in a while, Edward.
Yeah, well, I miss talking. to you guys from
Miss
time to
you.
time.
Miss you
We
too.
kinda
So,
hope maybe about some Christmas presents or something tonight.
I might have to at some point here, yeah.
That'd be fantastic.
This is just from my own experience. This isn't representing a client or anything else. I grew up around 116th and Allisonville and Fishers as they were developing. There were 5,000 people when my folks built the house that I grew up in there. And I watched it, my lifetime became what it is now. Now, you might not think looking at, it's got a strip mall, right? It's got two strip malls historically, right there in the corner of 116th and Allisonville. You might not think that's nice to look at or something pleasant, but it actually was really great for when you're talking about young families or people growing up. The walkability wasn't on 116th Street. It wasn't on Allisonville. It was through the neighborhoods that you got to the back of those two strip centers. They each had a grocery store in them and if anybody remembers Blockbuster. But various different things that a young person growing up could walk to before you can drive or ride and do. It wasn't necessarily the image from the perspective of the family and the walkability. They looked nice, but I mean, they're strip centers. They're still strip centers. But that type of development where you had a strip center with a Kroger and a grocery store and a haircut shop and a small hardware store that you could say, oh, yeah, you broke the light switch when you were screwing around in the house. Go walk to the hardware store and buy a new light switch. Right? When you're younger, that was a nice development nestled up against a neighborhood. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you're talking about walkability and bringing the town together. That's just a personal
You're
observation.
talking about accessibility of goods and services.
Right, and having it connected, so if you're at all familiar with that area, there's the River Glen neighborhood, that's where I grew up, nestled right by the other house, and you think, oh, the people in the backyard, they're looking at the loading docks of a Kroger and Blockbuster, which is now a pet store, and a Papa John's and whatever else is in there. But that accessibility, particularly when you're younger and you didn't have access to a car in a car-centric area, was very useful and nice to everyone I knew growing up in the neighborhood and all the parents. So that's just a thought I had while you were talking about this, and thought I'd say something nice at the time.
So how did you handle crossing that intersection in 116th and Allisonville? Because at one point in time, there were opportunities on basically 3 of the 4 corners.
Yeah, so, well, they wanted too much for where that Amazon was, for years and years. They wanted, I think, if I remember back in like 2002, they wanted $1.7 million for that corner. And you couldn't fit anything where that particular Amazon was, or not Amazon, Amoco station was. But I would go to the stoplight that was there at 116th and Allisonville. They had crosswalks. Somewhere in the 90s, they 4-laned it and put in the crosswalks there. So if I went to the Roost, if anybody's familiar with Psalm Restaurant, the Roost, if I was walking there on I-summer day, you would just go to the crosswalks. Or, I mean, at the time traffic was lighter, so I'd just Frogger it, you know.
I think you bring up a good point. We still have to ensure pedestrian safety, ingress and egress between each of the quadrants of the corner with proper crosswalks.
Yeah, and I think you don't want too much distance is part of my point. Like if I'm going to walk to the Papa John's, which I know the distance is there very well as a cross-country runner, so it's a quarter mile, a quarter to 3/4 of a mile between the house and the Papa John's, for example. That's enough time if you're walking at a sedate pace to walk there, grab a pizza and walk back without the pizza getting cold. If you have any farther than that, if you get a mile or more, you're not gonna walk there. Same if I wanna go grab a carton of milk, if I wanna walk to that Kroger, that Kroger's, you know, a little over 3/4 of a mile, okay, that's enough distance. But if I'm, for example, if we're talking about the Needlers over here at 67 and I'm in Hunsinger Farms, that's a 4-mile hike. That's just not gonna work from that perspective, unless you're a cross-country runner and you gotta go for a run, which is another thing, but that's something I'd look at from accessibility is how far away are the people from the service they want if you want them to walk.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is why I believe on the, I'll say the new west side, there's future zoning for
For
services.
services, yeah. Like retail.
Yeah.
So, and not to kind of be the old dead horse, but the original pub that they had over there for the Urbans, they had
Yeah.
Mystic Waters.
Yeah.
a small commercial up front. That was the initial idea.
Mhm.
Because,
Yeah.
because that was from the observations of Barb, who represented John before, that'd be my mother, who looked and said, if we put a Kroger or whatever is small retail in the front, and you have the neighborhood in the back, and kids in the neighborhood can walk to the small retail in the front off a major thoroughfare. And where I have now, where I live now, over at 96 Nolio, I have a small saddle strip center, but it doesn't have the same services and amenities, and it's a mile, 1.1 mile out. So it's just a little bit too far for the sedate walk if you want to stroll and get something done.
Well, I think Saxony Village is a good example of
It-
smaller.
I ran through there when it was being built. I remember all of that when I was at HSC cross country and we went through there. There's not a substantial service in there to go. There's no grocery store in there. The closest grocery store to there is 116th and Oleo. Right, so again, if you're walking, and I'm using the grocery, I'm getting something over there with the grocery store, but I'm using that as the example I had. There's
But you
no,
could even have a convenience store. It wouldn't have to be a full blown.
right, but they don't have even a 7-Eleven or anything like that in there. It's very nice.
Store over here downtown. Be nice. Macy's.
Yeah,
Trader Joe's.
Trader Joe's is nice. But that's just the thought that I have from walkability.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I hadn't spoken, I just felt I had to say something, so
Our
thank you
year will
for.
be complete now. then.
I do feel complete, yes, thank you. So, thank you very much.
Happy holidays.
You as well.
Well, would you like to say that? You've been awful quiet.
No, you don't, there's a different concept between if you're living further out and you're living in town. And Americans get in cars. They do it, we don't walk. To get things, because we don't wanna carry them.
Well, we can't have a grocery store every corner, and if you do, then the price is gonna be high. They're already complaining enough about dealers' prices being high, so they want to support dealers. So, we can't build a Costco every 3/4 of a mile.
They do put the new Costco 37.
But people do like to get out and walk. They move to this community for some of those features. We've seen it in the surveys that have gone out when the UDO was put together. And we want to continue that connectivity for safety and honestly, for ADA purposes and for people who are in wheelchairs, and I might have my wheelchair scooter one day. I want to get around.
We didn't want grandfather to escape the influx on that. If he got down to the South Shore station and he could have been in Chicago, we'd have no idea what happened.
The groceries thing's gonna go away, because nobody goes to the grocery store anymore. It's
They
all
just order
delivered
it.
and
Oh,
ordered
yeah.
online.
I haven't gone to the grocery store.
They sell them at your front door. You don't even leave the house.
Always been in person.
Get delivered.
What are you talking about?
I love it.
$7 whole a week.
Okay,
Oh, I did say.
What
Oh,
else we got?
back to the UDOs, we got there.
no, that's all I've
That's it?
got. So I'll kind of put something together the next couple, months or sessions for that and
can fine tune that.
I think Carmel's got a couple overlay districts.
They do,
Yeah.
yeah,
So are we gonna approve any of these tonight or?
yeah, we'll approve 1 through 5.
Good.
As you have discussed.
Can I have a motion to approve items 1 through 5 on the EDO list as we discussed and noted tonight, please? So move second.
Second.
All those in favor of items 1 through 5 on the EDO as discussed and noted tonight, please say aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Mr. Williams, would you like to say anything? Yes, speaker. Mr. Jones?
All good.
Board? Council?
Nothing, sir.
Happy holidays. Meeting adjourned.